you have had a pretty wild upbringing, I would say, based on the great dinners that you and I have had. How did the experiences that you had, really from zero through to your 30s, drive your interest and passion for the kind of work you do now, helping people flourish and, increase engagement in the workplace? What was the link there?
So yeah, I grew up in Baltimore. We'll just double click here for another second. My parents had me when they were young. My mom was an aspiring actress. She was very creative, very spiritual, but when she had me, she got diabetes and she got it hard. My dad, had kind of a troubled past as well, but he found it like the straight and narrow, but like they didn't have any money, so they got divorced young. And I was, kind of bounced around a lot. I lived on people's couches and, it just wasn't very stable. I went to 5 schools in 5 years. And it was, my mom was amazing, but we lived on food stamps. The refrigerator was empty often, and that does things to you. Because I know inside this is not where I should be. I know inside that this is not the existence that will be the existence moving forward, but to be sort of trapped, what felt like in jail, of not having optionality, not feeling like you can have the basics. And, that really did drive me. There was a lot of pain. There was a lot of trauma to that. And then you just add up the community and the environment, and it was everywhere, right? So there was a lot of violence. There was a lot of drugs. There were a lot of things that happened when I was 13, 14, and 15 that generally don't happen to people until they're 23, 24, and 25. And, as I kept running away from this environment, and as I said, I got to Hopkins, I was immediately found out that I was not as smart as everyone else, that potentially they made a mistake in letting me in, and I just said, it's time to buck up. And, my dad is just this hard charging, again, consistent, humble human being who both my parents gave me this, just this insatiable thirst for learning and this desire to win and succeed. And so, I think in a lot of ways I ran from my past. I used that pain and turned it into the purpose, as, kind of all of our friends might say. And I think as I got into this space, I think part of me kept feeling the imposter syndrome of when I got to Hopkins, I was like, they're going to figure me out. When I got a job at Anderson Consulting right out of school, I was like, I had a mentor sit me down and say, you just are not employable. I mean, if we're just we're going to cut to the chase here. And, I think in a lot of ways, it was some of the best advice I'd ever been given. And, for me, I have this weird story of where I never worked in corporate America. I've never worked for someone outside of the odds and ends jobs of just getting to the place that I am right now. And so for me, there was a moment where I was 8 years old. I was with my mom, and we had the church deliver us some food that day. And I remember rifling through the bag, and I they gave us good stuff. And I was like, oh yes, this is just and I mean, it really is true that, when you're hungry, you'd be surprised at what you might do. And I remember that time they gave us too much. And my mom was like, well, we're going to give the rest of the way to someone else. And I was irate. I mean, how could you, right? We barely have enough to make it through. And I mean, really having rage at 8. This is my mother, right? So what I learned from her and from my father, which is if you ask my mom for $20 that she didn't have, she'd give you the money in her pocket and the shirt off her back, the proverbial shirt. And I think from a generosity gene standpoint, I went if you've seen The Grinch, had a heart that was 2 sizes too small, and then decided to be nice to people. And all of a sudden his heart grew. When we gave that away, my heart grew. And I was like, oh my, it was an unlock. It was like I just found another level to a video game that I didn't know existed. And from that point forward, for me, I knew I was going to be okay. I believed what my mom and dad said, which was I was special, and that there was something in my life that I was going to have a chance to not give back, not pay it forward, but be of service. And part of that is just by trying to live a life of honor and integrity, and also drawing a circle of concern and compassion that's just a little wider than some. And not because I'm righteous or more resourced, but I do think, we're having this moment where when times are hard, I'm going to protect my family. Well, Rian. I mean, we are like 99.9%, biologically brothers. And we don't use that as part of our psyche. And I think that's our generation's opportunity, which is how do we widen this circle of concern? Because, I think we all get down with like a rising tide lifts all boats. I think we all get down when it's good for you, it's good for me, in an environment where it's not a win-lose. It's like, yeah, put your oxygen mask on first, for sure. But how much do you really need? I've been on boards, I've started a foundation, I've certainly given a lot back to the city in which I came from. And when I'm at these charity events, every once in a while, it hits me, as they parade the young kid up, and they're, I was at one recently for leukemia and in lymphoma society. Great organization. I'm glad we raised money. But when you parade a kid up there in front of all these wealthy people and you say, hey, will you help me live longer? And everybody's like, oh, I'll give you a little money. I'll give you, like, we give them spare. We don't give them all. We give them just enough. And that's an exercise in withholding. And it's withholding because we don't trust and we don't think we have enough, and this mindset of scarcity. And so I know we're all the way down like another rabbit hole, but for me, having come from not a lot, what I will say is we all have more than enough. And I think it's an opportunity where, we all know how this is going to go at the end of our lives. There's a great book called The 5 Regrets of Dying from Bronnie Ware, who, said this, like, you're not going to say, gosh, how much stuff am I taking with me? It's, how did I live? How did I love? Did I live a life that was my doing or someone else's? And I think that's the opportunity of, like, we just get to be of service, and particularly during hard moments like this. So that's how it all worked.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.